Here's the Bet Part 2 short story, which is which is based on a true story. Only the homeless would be out in this weather, thought Josh. It was like securing a blob of jelly. The tent kept moving as if it had a life of its own. Finally, the pegs were hammered down and it became stable. They climbed inside on their hands and knees. Michael was surprised how warm and comfy it was inside the tent, and his fear lessened a little as he emptied his bag of bottled water, chocolate, and trusty Walkman. He really hoped the batteries were working as he needed some entertainment to get him through the long evening. "How's it feel, mate?" said Josh, grinning wildly. "Cool," said Michael. "Should be a piece of cake," he said hopefully. "I'll have to go now, mate," said Josh. "Good luck," as he shook his hand and unzipped the tent. This was a shock and a surprise to Michael, and he watched him walk away until he was a speck in the distance. He was disappointed, as he thought he was going to keep him company. He suddenly felt so alone and frightened. He zipped up the tent, and there was no sound, only the constant drip drip of the rain on the roof and the whistle of the wind. Michael looked at the dark sky through the zip of the tent, and the gravestones shone in the moonlight as a reminder of his fate. Hair stood up on the back of his neck as the night came and swallowed all before it, until all he could see was a twinkling of the lights of the town too far away in the distance. He zipped up the tent and lay hazily on his back and pondered his fate. A plan formed in his mind, and he would imagine that he was at home in his bedroom and not in this cold, spooky place. And he pushed all of the thoughts to the contrary out of his mind. He only had about 10 hours to get through. How hard could it be, he thought. He would soon find out. He decided to drink the water in one go, as he didn't want to be going to the toilet all night. The chocolate he would eat in stages. He took a quick bite, and his mood improved instantly. It was delicious, and he let it slowly melt in his mouth. The rain had stopped to a light drip every few seconds, and the wind had quietened. Michael lay back on his sleeping bag and popped another piece into his mouth. He was getting into a good mood. "This will be just like a walk in the park," he said to himself. Then he put the headphones on and pressed play. The ticking sounds of light clockwork filled his ears. It had been a while since he had used his Walkman, and he was amazed at how good it sounded. It was easy to forget that he was outside as the tent warmed up, and he lay comfortable on his back. He needed to stay up late so that he would fall asleep quickly and wake in the morning relieved and victorious. The ticking of the song came to an end, and the rushing of the tape filled his ears. Then another sound dominated. A loud, sharp snap of a twig cut his reverie dead. He pressed pause, and another sound filled the tent. It was a thud, thud, thud of his heart, and the realization came to him again. He wasn't at home, he was in the open, surrounded by dead bodies, angry crows, and God knows what else. It was like being in an Edgar Allan Poe story, and he didn't know the ending. He listened intently for footsteps or another crack of a twig, but none came. Sweat ran down his brow and his sweaty palms. He took another bite of chocolate and ate it slowly, and he tried to make as little sound as possible. All of his senses were on high alert, waiting for the next sound. The ticking of his watch seemed to echo around the tent like thunder. He waited for the next sound, but it never came, and through the exhaustion of concentrating so hard, he fell asleep. Crunch, 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 the heavy footsteps walking around the tent. Michael sat up in shock and gathered his thoughts. The sounds were unmistakable, heavy and getting nearer. "This is it," he thought. "I'm done for." He looked at his watch. It was 4 a.m. No time for anyone to be about in the pitch-black graveyard. He wished he'd brought a knife for protection, but would he be able to use it? Closer and closer the footsteps sounded until they were around the tent. Michael was too terrified to move, but he knew he had to do something. He couldn't just wait to be attacked. He had to act first. It was then that he heard more shallow breathing outside. He didn't know if he was dealing with a person or a spectre. He wasn't going to wait to find out. It was time to be brave no matter what the consequences. He pulled the zipper down and peered into the dark. The footsteps had stopped, but the breathing continued. He stuck his head out and half expected it to be chopped off by an axe-wielding madman. It was then that he saw a figure in the distance who appeared to sway in the moonlight. This is it, he thought. I'm done for. And then the ghostly figure walked towards him with the same breathing sounds. Michael had to say something. He had to speak up. As he did so, a beam of light struck him in the face, blinding and disorientating him. The figure came closer. Michael squinted into the light. Who are you? He shouted, half terrified of the response. His eyes adjusted to the glare, and a man wearing a big coat and hat walked towards him with something in his hand. A weapon, no doubt, thought Michael. Don't worry, son, he said. I'm just having an early morning stroll. Michael considered this unlikely possibility, but he decided to go with it. The man stood before him, and in his hand was not a weapon, but a silver torch, and a Jack Russell at his feet, panting and sending clouds of frosty breath into the air. Michael sighed a sigh of relief, and the man went on his way, but not before asking a pertinent question. What are you doing camping out in the graveyard anyway? The man said, incredulous. For a bet, Michael answered truthfully, and they both laughed. Well, I hope you win, the man replied as he ambled off into the foggy distance. That evening, Josh and Michael sat in their local, and Josh quizzed him how it had gone. He didn't want to admit it, but he was impressed. He would never have done it himself. Oh, it was a piece of cake, mate, Michael said, sipping his pint leisurely. Not scary then, said Josh, looking impressed. No, not at all, said Michael convincingly. And he gladly accepted his £5 winnings and secretly vowed never to go near graveyards late at night ever again.